we opened it in 85, hoping to get ready for the 88 presidential elections. We weren't thinking anything about local races at all at the time. They were having the city council races in Dearborn and the mayoral race, and the guy running for mayor ran on the platform of what to do about the Arab problem. He sent a tabloid newspaper to everybody's house with New York Daily News size headlines, what to do about the Arab problem. And the Arab problem was, as he put it in his tabloid, these foreigners moving into our neighborhoods, they don't speak our language, they don't respect our way of life, and they're threatening our values. People were traumatized. At the time, there were about 17,000 out of 93,000 were Arab. When we looked at the voter rolls, there were 700. And if you're that large, but your vote is that small, you're an easy target, right? So we sat down to do voter registration, and we worked with a group there locally. We provided funding, we provided some staff support. And in 1996, we were doing our presidential forum, and the guy who ran for mayor was still mayor. He came to the event, and he started off with a little bit of Arabic and quoted the Quran, and "My dear brothers and sisters," he said. The guy sitting next to me in the audience was representing Bill Clinton. He was the personnel director at the White House, Bob Nash. He looked over at me and he said, "Son of a bitch knows how to count." Because at that point, they were up to 8,000 registered voters. And today, the president of the city council of Dearborn is Arab American. The majority of the city council is Arab American. The state representative from that area is Arab American. And there are 3 judges elected who are Arab American. I mean, the point is they transformed themselves. Paterson, New Jersey, same story. They were completely nowhere. Street signs were in Arabic. I mean, I call the city Dearborn East. But if you go to Dearborn, if you go to Paterson rather, they were everywhere but in politics. Today, the mayor of Dearborn, I keep calling it Dearborn, they're gonna hate me in Paterson. The mayor of Paterson's an Arab American who ran against another Arab American, intra-community feud, as it were. And I'm looking at you've probably seen the letter that AOC has started on conditioning aid to Israel over the annexation, the potential annexation of the West Bank. Look at the people who signed that letter. They include a couple of your Congress people. And why are they there? First time I met Danny Davis was at an Arab American event in Michigan when he was just starting off. And Chuy Garcia. I remember when Luis Gutierrez and Chuy Garcia, Vivian I see is on the call, Vivian Khalif. And Vivian was, I hate to say this, Vivian, you were just a kid back then, right? And you were going to those meetings that we were having of the early Democratic club there. And they were coming because they were just starting to run for alderman, and you all got behind them and made relationships that have lasted till this day. Nidia Velasquez is on the letter. Nidia was elected over Steve Solar's in part Manhattan, part Brooklyn. And when she was elected, she said, "I owe it all to the Arab grocers because they passed out her literature in the grocery stores." I mean, the point is that we have the potential to be great. We have to actualize that potential. And the way you start is with voter registration. I just want to give you a point. When we started the Institute, a businessman who was a friend told me, he said, "How are you going to do this?" And I told him, I said, "Our goals are voter registration, identifying Arab Americans to run for office, supporting them when they run for office, organizing a network of Arab American elected officials and party leaders, and bringing our issues into the political mainstream." Every year on the anniversary of the founding of the Institute, he'd call me and he'd say, "How many voters did you register? How many candidates did you have this year? How many got elected? Do you know where they are? Do you have the lists?" He said, "Look," he said, "it's politics, but it's also business. It's like a small business. And you all know how to run businesses. And the way you run a business is you have to have quantifiable results. You got to have data." And he said, "Politics is the same thing. It is not like just airy-fairy stuff. It's not big ideas only. It's also actualizing those big ideas by showing the building blocks of growth." And so I would want to work with you. We want to be partners as we go forward. And frankly, I think that the future of the Arab community in Chicago is enormous, because where you were back in '85 and where you are today, when I was on that virtual iftar, and you had the governor, and you had the mayor, and you had the president of the board of supervisors, I said, these guys are moving. And this is where we always wanted our community to be. We want this story to be repeated in every big city, because frankly, we've got the numbers, we've got the smarts, and we've got the issues and concerns. All we have to do is translate that into politics. And the way you start is with building the vote. The bigger the vote, because these guys know how to count. And at the end of the day, there's more of us than there are of other groups, many other groups. I chair the Ethnic Council in the Democratic Party, and frankly, there are lots of groups in the council who'd say to me, and it sounds strange, because when you're Arab American, you kind of feel like, we bought the myth. We bought the myth that we're not organized enough, and we don't respect our leaders, and we don't do this, and we're late for everything. And we have all these things about our complexes that have been taught to us about how we just don't know how to do it. But there are groups that come to me in the Ethnic Council and say, we wish we were as organized as the Arab Americans are. And that sounds strange, because we are living with these complexes. But the reality is, if you look at where we were and look at where we are, the trajectory tells me that where we're going is going to be even bigger and better. And we are a group of importance, and we have huge burdens on our shoulders, both domestically and in terms of foreign policy. Our goal is to make America smarter, make America better. I mean, if anybody's going to make America better, it's going to be us. Because think about the issues that we face every day in small business, in our neighborhoods, in the issues that we have to deal with in terms of immigration policy and dealing with law enforcement. And look at then the expertise that we bring to the table. We have enormous capacity to make change. But where you start is at the very beginning of the process, and that's increasing the vote. First, you increase the vote, then you mobilize the vote, and then you actualize the vote on elections. And at some point, politicians pay attention, as they're already starting to pay attention. In Chicago, you don't get the governor and the mayor if there is not something there that they know about. They know the strength of this community. As I look at it, I think you're something like 3-4% of Chicago vote. That's big. I remember Harold Washington came to our founding event, and he said to me, we were in the back, and he said, Zogby, he said, everybody looks at Chicago as black and white. He's the black vote and the white vote. He said, I look at brown in the middle. He said, your community is an important part of that. You make the difference between winning and losing. And I'm so proud that, to be a part of what you're doing. We want to be partners as we go forward. We've got our Yellow Vote campaign, and our shirts will be available to you if you want them. We'll send them out free to when you finally get to go door to door. Is Nadia on the call? I don't know if she is. Nadia Aziz in our office does a lot of our field work, and we have these. You've probably seen the Yellow Vote shirts. We'd like to make them available to you guys, especially kids on campuses if they're doing voter registration or going door to door, when you're able to do it. But between now and then, you're right. And we've got this challenge of how do we organize when we're limited to doing it this way. And there are ways to do it, and we're struggling with you. And I invited somebody to join us on the call who's the battleground director for the Democratic Party, Battleground States Director, Lila Jaffer. She's great, and the resources that she has will be available to you too. We want to see what we can do to make this a big success for you, because if Chicago succeeds and Michigan succeeds and New Jersey succeeds and California, if all the states where we have big numbers succeed, then we're going to succeed nationally as a community. And I thank you for, again, the opportunity to be with you tonight and to be a part of this launch. I'm really honored. And like I said, I feel like a proud papa because we started this work a long time ago, and seeing, you know, as my uncle Habib used to say, this next generator, they're great. And I turn it over to you guys, and I thank you again for giving me the chance to be with you all. Thanks.
Thank you for coming. We'll definitely be tapping into you as we go forward. And just for a point of reference, I was born in 1984, so we've done a lot of work up to this point. 2 points I want to really highlight of what you said. The first one is we as Chicagoans, we all know we're a proud people. Arabs are a proud people, but Chicagoans, you know, we love to tell you we're from Chicago, and that's something we stick to. But the main thing I want to get out of what you said is data. Data matters. And without data, without the numbers, you know, everything we do is just not going to work. So speaking of numbers, we want to bring in our numbers guy. I do want to bring in our executive director. He is Sufyan, and he's not only our executive director, he's a political activist in the Southwest side, Southwest suburbs. Sufyan, you know, young guy, but, you know, in my opinion, he's part of that young push that's going to really be the ones that lead us. We're the ones that are going to support the younger generation. So Sufyan, please step in. And Sufyan's going to talk to us about a lot of the numbers that we have for the area, just to give people a bigger picture of kind of what the numbers look like and how we plan to tap into those numbers. So Sufyan, the floor is yours, my friend.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Mo. I appreciate it. And Dr. Zogby, thank you so much for joining us today. This was, you know, everything that you said, you know, resonated with me, and look forward to working together. Can everyone hear me? I just wanted to make sure before I move forward.
Yes, you're good, Sufyan.
Everyone can hear me? Okay, great. You know, from the perspective of the organization, the reason that we started this organization is because of the critical need for voter registration in the Southwest suburban area for the Middle Eastern North African community. The focus of the organization, like Mo just said, is critically centered around data, right? Who's registered, who's not registered. Within the same family, some people may be registered and some people may not be registered, right? Our ability to house all of that data under one roof and go forward and try to register as many people as possible while retaining their information, so that, you know, because it's really two hills, right? We can register someone to vote, but then we also have to come back and remind them to vote when it's election season, right? So those are two very important things. So we're going to get all these people registered, inshallah, and that's very critical to what our mission is. And then when election season comes around, we're going to be pushing people with a get out the vote effort to make sure that they go out and vote and increase our numbers in the electorate. Yeah. So so I have a graph that I shared earlier. Rush, I believe. I don't know if you can share that here on the screen. I just want to make sure that we have that so that I can go over it. And basically that graph includes a lot of different areas. Okay, so this is what I'm going to do here. I'm going to share the graph. Give me one moment, everyone. Okay, does everyone see the graph there on their screen?
Graph is up. Graph is up,
Is everyone seeing
Sufyan.
that graph?
Yeah, the graph is up live for broadcast.
No.
Okay. Give me one moment here.
Let's move on, Sufyan, and speak about it if you don't mind.
Sure. So, so in terms of, I mean, you know, even without the graph, I can speak about the numbers generally, and there are certain areas. There are certain areas that I think that we should be focusing on, particularly as we go into the stretch in 2020, leading up to the general election in November, as well as, you know, leading into the municipal elections of 2021. And those areas are Orland Township and Palos Township. And I just wanted to speak about the numbers that we're looking at in those areas. And obviously these are estimates. We don't have the exact numbers, but this is, you know, within a certain margin of error. These are the numbers that are available to us. So, for example, in Orland Township, you have about 7,000, a little more than 7,300 registered voters from the Middle Eastern North African community, and 11,000 who are unregistered. And to put that into perspective, you have 9,500, more or less around 9,500 votes is what it takes to win an election across the entire township. So we're talking about if we have 18,000 people registered, which is the goal for that township to get everyone registered, and you have half of them go out to vote, you're talking about making a gigantic difference, a critical difference in who is elected to those seats, and that puts us in a position where we can, as a community, advance the issues that really matter to us, and that matter to working people everywhere, right? And so that's Orland Township. In Palos Township, there's about right around 4,600 registered, and close to 7,000 unregistered. And it only takes 3,000 votes to win in Palos Township. In the municipality of Orland Park alone, there's about 3,600 registered and 5,400 unregistered, right? These are all Middle Eastern North African, people of Middle Eastern North African descent. And in Orland Park, you need about 7,000 votes to win. And so you see this trend that's ongoing, right? And that is that, if we are able to, the numbers speak to this, and that is if we are able to get these folks registered and work together with all of you to do that, right? And in whatever capacity possible, that we're going to be making a significant impact, right? In the elections, in these local elections. And that's very important, particularly because, the old saying is all politics are local, right? But even more so than that, those local elections, they're a great place to start, just like Dr. Zogby said, because they make an impact in your everyday life in an almost immediate way, right? And so if we have people there that are advocating for us, that believe in the issues that we support, then we're gonna be starting off on the right foot, and that's what I truly believe. And that is pretty much all I had. If anyone has any questions about the numbers, feel free to ask it. I know we're going to do Q&A later on, so feel free.
Yeah, we'll definitely start getting more into kind of the details, the numbers, and all that. We want to kind of give just a brief background. One, to show what our strength could be, but more so to show how much work we have to do in order to tap into these numbers. So, what we want to do today was actually kind of get into some of the questions, our concerns that others have kind of approached us and some of the board members prior to this launch. So we kind of wanted to get into some of that. The first one I'm going to shoot over to Iyad Hassan. Iyad and I, we go way back. Iyad does a lot in the community, does a lot behind closed doors. By trade, he is an IT independent contractor. I'm not going to ask what you do because I never understand what IT people do anyways. So we're just going to call you an IT guy. So Iyad, I know one question that I think all the board members have received or were asked about is, we see a lot of organizations coming out. Basically, how are we different? How is Saawtu different from, let's say, AMBO and AADC and so many of these other political organizations in our community? How are we different, and why are we just not the same as everyone else?
Yeah, so that's definitely, good evening, everyone, by the way, but that's definitely the most common question I get, and rightfully so, right? You hear of all these organizations, acronyms that take up the entire alphabet, and you're kind of like, all right, another one. When I introduced it to a neighbor of mine, the first response was, oh, what do you guys do? We want to register people to vote. Oh yeah, I used to do that as a volunteer. So he hit the two things on the head there. So what do we do? As Hamad opened up with, and so Sofiane elaborated on, it's to register people to vote, right? And we don't, we're not trying to supplant any other organization out there or replace any organization out there. All organizations, I think, have a purpose. We have the need in our community, most definitely. I think they've all done a great job in their own right. For us, it's seeing a gap that wasn't filled by any other organization, a need for the community, and it's to register people to vote. Now you've seen folks probably at Friday prayer or at Sunday services or different brunches, sitting in the back at a table registering Arab Americans to vote, trying to get people to vote. But all these folks have been on a volunteer basis, and at the end of the day, it is volunteer work. The accountability there is at the level of a volunteer. Not to discount what they're doing, discredit what they're doing. We need volunteers. Volunteers make these kind of organizations keep going. There's a catalyst behind these kinds of organizations, not trying to discount it. But at the end of the day, I'm going to point back to something Dr. Zogby said, in that it has to be quantifiable, right? So I have to be able to tell you, you're going to give me X amount of dollars, right? We're going to invest X amount of dollars, and my output is going to be Y, right? So we're gonna dump $10,000 into voter registration, and our goal is to register 60% or 70% of the Arab American population in the southwest suburbs, and I'm just throwing round numbers out there. So that's the major thing behind what we do. And in the short amount of time that we've been up and running, Sufyan, I mean, a lot of people have been working behind the scenes, but Sufyan has been able to secure a grant for us and I'll let him elaborate on that, but a grant for certain type of advertising. So it's things like that. Us taking a different approach to voter registration, where it's going to be folks that this is going to be their full-time job.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I think others have said that as well. As as you stated, volunteers are great. I mean, we all love volunteers. We all need volunteers, and a lot of us volunteer as well. But to have a long-lasting, impactful group, you need to have paid staff, and that's in every world. It's not just in this world. I mean, if you want long-term success and you want great work, people want to get paid for it. And once you have that, then you could really build and sustain on that, because it's really important for our community members that when they do want to run, to know that they have a group with a full-time staff there to back them up in need. And this is why I want to bring in my friend and awesome, great attorney, Mirvat Muhammad. She is the owner and founder of Kiswani Law. So Mirvat, I want to talk briefly about your experience. I know you ran for local office, I believe a couple of years ago. So can you talk briefly about your experience when you ran, some of the issues that you ran into, and how a group like Saawtu, if it was around, might have been very beneficial to your run during that time?
Definitely. So I ran in 2017 for Fifth Ward Alderman of Palos Hills. And at that time, even though it was only 3 years ago, there was definitely a lack of resources, there was a lack of information, and there was a lack of bodies, right? So people that would help knock on doors, people that would help make sure that there were voter turnouts, and people who would help with the numbers as to how many voters needed to come out at that time to vote. So with an organization like Saawtu being behind, anyone who's running for local politics or even statewide politics, or at some point maybe even national politics, for a political position, you can definitely use the resources like voter turnout, like the numbers that Sufyan essentially would be able to help us generate, or even asking for resources like volunteers. I definitely think that the resources like volunteers and crunching the numbers as far as voter turnout would definitely help any person running for a political position to know exactly how much more work, how much more people they need, and how much more knocking on doors you need in order to get that win.
Yeah, and yours was a few years ago, and then we had Abdel Nasser do a couple runs, and then Rush made his run, and I really believe that a group like this could really benefited all of those people. And I think, for the younger generation, I think, or let me ask you, when you ran, if the younger generation sees a group out there that's willing to back them up with a full-time staff, numbers, data, boots on the ground. Do you think that would have enticed you to maybe run again, or would this entice others, the future younger generation, give them more confidence to run for office if they knew they had this kind of backing?
Definitely. I think people are really scared of putting themselves out there, and they're really scared of losing, right? So if you have more of a support system behind you, then that's less intimidating.
Yeah, and what is it that you think in your run that you didn't have that you wish you did have?
I wish I had more volunteers, and I wish I had help navigating how much more voters needed to come out in order for me to win. Because it's such a small local election, really every vote counts. And I think a lot of people don't have, the information needed in order to know that actually every vote counts in a local election. It's not like a presidential election.
Right. And I think that's one thing that's part of what we want to do is also the education component. So do you think if people were more educated and understood that, to win that position you ran for, you don't need a million votes. We just need a nice set of a group of people to come in and vote a certain way, that you could have possibly won that seat?
Definitely. And I think there needs to be education. I'm sorry, I cut you off.
No, you're good. That
Okay.
was my question. Do you think there needs to be a more education component to this as well?
There does, especially with people going out to vote, because there's a lot of myths tied into if you register to vote, all of a sudden you're going to be selected on a jury. All of a sudden, the eye is on you for all these other non-obligatory or maybe obligatory things. So I'd rather not sign up to vote because I don't want to serve on a jury, or I don't want anyone looking at me, or people are scared. So I definitely think that education is needed.
Yeah, and I agree. And I think seeing people like you on the ballot and Rush and Abdel Nasser and Dave Shalaby, I know my mom, who's almost 70, she wanted to go vote for Rush and Abdel Nasser, right? And she hasn't voted in probably 20 plus years. But because she saw them and she saw the community engaged, I think that really motivated her. And I remember when who's Abdel Nasser was running, someone went to vote and that wasn't his district. And he called me going off, oh, they took Abdel Nasser off our ballot. He's not on my ballot. And I had to explain to him, well, you're just out of his district. He was really upset because he wanted to vote for Abdel Nasser. And that was a first-time voter. So I think it's very important for our community to see people that look like them on the ballot and having a group push that as part of the education. Now, the tough part that we're going to have coming up, and Dr. Zogby kind of alluded to this as well, is with COVID and everything that's going on right now, how do we go out and, as they say, pound the pavement and get people energized and get people on the ballots to register and all of that. So I'm going to bring in the awesome, the legendary, the wonderful attorney, Vivian Khalaf, who is the managing partner at Khalaf and Abu Zir. She's going to kill me for that introduction, but I'll deal with her later on that. So Vivian, this is something we've discussed, I think, in depth, and I think we're going to discuss even more in depth coming up in the future. But, COVID threw a big monkey wrench in everything, as we all know. That's stating the obvious. But we can't stop. Elections are still going to go on. November's coming up, sooner than we all think. So let's discuss, in your opinion, some of the ideas that you think that we can do during COVID to still continue this push for voter registration. Excuse me.
Sure. Well, first, I want to thank Dr. Zogby. I mean, most of us, especially me, really stand on his shoulders. He paved the way for most of us. I was only 18 when I started doing this type of work here in the United States, fresh from the West Bank to the US, and I found Dr. Zogby. So thank you for everything you do. I think, we hope to complement what the Institute has done for several decades now, and push the same agenda and the same type of work. So again, thanks for also being a part of this launch. In terms of COVID, look, I wish I had the answers. Most of us are small business people, we're professionals, and we're struggling with how to continue with our businesses and with our line of work, given this very strange situation that we find ourselves in. So a lot of people are struggling on many levels, but that doesn't mean we have to sit home and close our offices and close our stores and close our not-for-profit organizations. To the contrary, this is the time where we need to get creative. And I'll tell you, if there's one quality in the Arab world where, we really shine, that's with our creativity. We can get this things done in ways no other people really can. And I think that comes from, the backgrounds, our backgrounds and our political situations in our home country. We work with the impossible and make it possible. And this is what we have to do. We have to have our eyes towards November and beyond. We have to make sure we are safe in the way we work with people. This is usually a hands-on type of work where we knock on doors. We have meet and greets. We plan events and ask people to come to events physically. That can't be done. But other things can be done. We have to utilize social media more, and this is a prime example. We're still learning our way around Zoom. I know a lot of people had trouble Zooming in this afternoon. I'm seeing, messages coming in. But hey, we have to work our way around it. We learn as we go. And I think this is going to be an exceptional tool that we will continue to utilize in the days, weeks, and months to come to organize. We have a great number that are participating today, more than I expected, frankly. And I think as we do more of these and as we start to show what type of work we're implementing, we're going to have more people getting excited, rallying around this new method of communication and new method of organizing. So social media is key. It's not to say that we can't knock on doors soon. Illinois is in phase 4. We're going to phase 5. Even without COVID, people are reluctant to open their doors, and let you in or speak to you from their doors. But we can certainly try, again, while maintaining social distancing, while asking them away from their doors, whether or not we can chat with them for a moment or two. Drive-bys. We're getting creative with graduation parties. I can't tell you how many graduation parties and weddings that I see on Facebook and on social media that are done in such a way that is, great. It gets the job done. So there's no reason why we can't utilize a lot of these ideas and a lot of these new ways of organizing moving forward. And that's why we're here talking to everybody. That's why we want to solicit and elicit questions, ideas. This is a work in progress. We've just launched, although there's been a lot of footwork done before today. There's still a lot to be done. And our main priority is to listen to ideas that may not have come across, our desks, our minds, from those of you that have been doing this as participants in other organizations. This is going to be a little bit different. We're not going to be asking for volunteers only. We want to build a organization that is sustainable, that'll last from one election to the other and in between. And we're not going to win elections until we lose elections. And we've been losing elections, here and there with our local people, but that's okay. We're going to win some one day, but it requires people to get registered to vote and get over to the ballot box. And we have to think collectively. We have to think together how to make that happen moving forward. So I wish I had the answers and a magical answer to this, but I think we need to tap into the resources of the Institute and, an AmVote and the Democratic Club and all of these wonderful organizations who do their part. And build on their successes and learn, from our own failures and our own shortcomings. And there have been lessons learned. And I'm the first to say I've learned a lot of lessons in the last several months by organizing and working on campaigns. But that's only given me the energy to launch this organization and become an integral part of this local organization. And I'm hoping that those of you who are listening to me, those of you who have joined us today, will continue on this path that we've embarked on and bring others to join along. And again, it's a work in progress. It's not going to be easy, but we're committed. We're committed like never before because this is a different world. Changes are happening that we never expected to happen. And it really takes a village. And we are one big village. And I'm just so happy to see all these faces and all of these names. And looking forward to continue.
Let me piggyback off that too, Vivian, which to answer also a couple of the questions that we were getting, which are all good questions to kind of wrap it up. So people are asking, are we going to work with other groups such as AAI, AADC and AmVote and so on and so forth. And I think I speak for all of us when I say we have a plan of action. We have ideas that we want to implement. However, we are always open to suggestions, working with other groups. Absolutely. We're definitely going to tap into AAI and other groups that can help. We want to be clear. This is a community effort. This is not about one individual or any individual campaigns. This is for the entire community. So if we see tools or assets that we think will be beneficial to the community and voting, we're going to use it and we're going to be open to that. We just want to keep stressing about paid staff, because I know a lot of people are in here have been involved, and we understand the difference between full-time staff and part-time volunteers. One good question that I want to shoot over to Sufyan, you're the numbers guy, you're the nitty-gritty type of guy. What tools, and Bassem is on this, he wants to know what tools and platforms do you plan on using, does the group plan on using to kind of figure out the data and figure out what needs to be done? I know you've discussed it in the past, and we actually had a donation, if not recently, to cover some of that expense. So can you, Sufyan, just give us a brief rundown on some of the tools and platforms that you plan to use to help us generate these numbers?
Absolutely. In terms of the softwares and the platforms that we'll be using, there's really two main types of pushes that you can make to register people to vote. So one push that can be done is on the ground. And I know Vivian already spoke about, obviously we can't do on the ground right now, right? But we can still do direct contact over the phone, right? And so what we've done is there's a software called the Voter Action Network. And through that software, we're going to be able to have people's phone numbers. We're going to have a lot of information on unregistered voters in the state of Illinois. And we have, in addition to that, we have people's phone numbers who are part of a household that has an unregistered voter. So even if we don't have their, husband's information, phone number, for example, or their cousins or what have you, we can call them and say, can we count on you to register everyone in your household, right, and turn them out to vote for the November election. So that's one method. And that method also, that software gives us access to addresses and different ways of targeting particular voters, just in terms of their scores and all of that. And I won't get into all those details, but when we do eventually get on the ground, that's the software we're going to be using to create walk lists and go and knock on the door and say, hey, can I register you to vote today? And we will know that there's someone at that home that is unregistered, and we'll know their name, and we can ask and say, hey, I'm here to register, Bassem to vote. I'm here to register Sufyan to vote. And then the second form is digitally, right? And so that's running ads on multiple platforms. So we have access to Facebook ads. We have access to Google ads. Yad spoke before about a grant. We actually got a grant from Google to run ads on their platform for our organization with a very sizable amount every month. And so that will allow us to get out to as many people as we can to register to vote and to engage them to actually vote. So those are the two main platforms, two main ways that we'll be registering people to vote and retaining people's information as well for future use.
Can you talk about the tools that, I know you got some really geeky, cool tools that you use for this stuff that I still don't completely understand. So
sure, yeah.
Kind of somewhat dumb it down for us, but give us an idea of the tools that you have that a lot of people don't know about that goes into these things.
Absolutely. So one main tool that I've used in the past is called geofencing. And so some people in this chat may be familiar with it. But the idea with geofencing is, in the particular software that I use, allows us to put in, so let's say I have 10,000 addresses where I know for a fact these 10,000 addresses each one of them has at least one person who is not registered to vote, who lives at that location. I can create a digital radius around that home or that address within 50 feet. And then we can specify to launch a particular ad to launch at that location at a specific time across a specific set of dates, right? So that's as granular, as specific as we can possibly be. We know where these people are who are not registered to vote, and we're going to push as hard as we can to get them registered to vote, even using this software to launch an ad directly at their home saying, hey, you know, register to vote, make sure that you do it. It takes less than 2 minutes.
That's a good explanation, which leads me to the other thing, since we got you on.
Sure.
So just so we're clear, we are a registered, filed 501c3. We are officially a C3, which will focus primarily on voter registration. However, we do have a C4 side, correct?
Correct.
Okay, can you just briefly describe what the C4 side will do, and kind of what's the purpose of having the C4 instead of the C3?
Absolutely. So obviously, for people who don't know the kind of the intricacies here, I was actually very confused about it myself. But so a 501c3 is a registered charity, and on that side, we're actually going to be doing all of the registration. We're going to be doing all of those ads that I talked about, those the door knocking to register people to vote. That's all going to happen on the C3 side. On the C4 side, what a 501c4 is it's an organization type that allows us to engage in politics and support particular candidates without giving that candidate money. So we can spend money to support a candidate in a particular race without giving that money directly to the candidate. And we can do other things to support that candidate as well. And so I think we're very intentional about the way that we put together the structure for this organization, because we understand that getting people registered to vote is very important. And then once we get them registered to vote, then we have to direct them and help to, give them information on, here are some groups, here are some slates, here are some candidates that are advocating for issues that matter to us, right? And here are some of our endorsees and all of that. All of that's going to be done on the C4 side. And one thing I did want to mention before I close is that obviously on the C3 side, all donations that we receive are tax exempt, and on the C4 side they are not. Right, so that's also a distinction as well. But on the C4 side, it's all pretty much candidate-specific endorsements and spending money in particular races.
Yeah, and to add to that, someone did ask about reaching out to kind of religious institutions, churches, mosques, so on and so forth. Are we allowed to do that on the C3 side or only on the C4 side? And what's the plan for getting the religious institutions involved without violating our basically our status?
Of course. So in terms of religious institutions, for example, we have some very large mosques that are here in the southwest suburbs, in Orland Park and in Bridgeview, and in Willowbrook, I believe. And so I've actually, the best way to involve religious institutions, in my experience, is to work with them on the C3 side. Let's engage them in order to get folks registered to vote. Obviously, religious institutions are very similar to 501c3 institutions, and so because of that, they can't be politically involved or partisan at all. So we can't involve them on the C4 side, but definitely on the C3 side, and working together with their leadership to get their constituencies registered.
Awesome. Okay, I'm going to shift back over to Midvet, and I want to, a lot of people are going to ask, and some have asked already, regarding volunteers, preferably high school and college volunteers. So we do want to have it to where they can volunteer and get community service hours. But Midvet, the reason I want to ask you is, you ran years ago, and we talked about the youth, but one, are we going to offer credits for those that want to volunteer? And two, what's the importance of getting them involved?
I definitely think that we're open to having volunteers. But before we do that, we definitely need staff member who will able to coordinate all the volunteers and make sure that everybody has a positive, a positive experience volunteering with us. So we're definitely launching that. We're looking into that. We want the youth to be a part of the process, because I do think that once the youth see that this is a very active movement, then maybe in the future, they'll be the same ones that would want to run.
I agree. And I do want to point something out, and he's probably going to kill me, but our executive director is by far the youngest person in the organization at this point. He is very experienced. He's been involved in campaigns. But the reason I wanted to point out Safian being the youngest is, we all know that our time comes up at some point, and we want to make a group that's going to be long lasting, and a group that you don't always see the same faces continuously over and over. We want to build this for the younger generation to do it. We're going to be able to do so much, but I really think that generation is going to be the one that really takes it to the top and takes it to another level. So we really want to build a strong foundation for the future generations, so they can continue to build on. And as we continue to build on, things like Dr. Zogby did and the previous generations, I do want to point out that our executive director is by far the youngest person in the group, and we are completely fine with that. And we are happy to have him.
Can I come in for a second?
Yes.
Okay. I remember I used to say this in Chicago in particular. When we started our work, we started with the small businesses. We started with the grocers mainly. That was our organizing vehicle. And some of the folks used to say to me, they used to say, I don't do politics, I do business. And I used to say, the biggest business in Chicago is politics. That's where the contract, to be really crass about it, the benefits of getting involved in politics, of knowing people in elective office, of being able to have access to power, of being able to get your folks elected so you have direct contact with the positions of power. Even, when we'd get somebody who'd be the head of a Democratic organization, or they'd become elected as a committee person, their ability to have access to elected officials is different than if you go as the head of a club, of a Palestinian club or a mosque or something, because you are part of that process and they need you like you need them. The other thing is about young people. One of the proudest things we have at the Institute is our AAI Alum Association. It's a couple hundred people, folks who started with us, were interns in our office or staff, who have gone on to become everything from cabinet members in state governments to themselves elected officials to senior folks in NGOs that back when I came to Washington in the 70s wouldn't let Arabs in the front door. And now some of these folks are running these immigration groups, et cetera. And so the word to young people is, it's one of the best steps you can take into a successful career in public service or even in business. Politics is a door that opens and presents you with unlimited possibilities. And as somebody had said, you didn't say to people, why should they vote, or what's the enthusiasm about voting? The enthusiasm about voting is that politics is going to happen with or without us. And if it happens without us, we get locked out. The pie gets cut up and we're not in the room when it gets cut. But if you are in the game, then you actually, I remember one of the folks, we started a Republican club in one area, and he got to be the head of the Republican club, and because of the way the charter in the state was drawn, if you formed a club and had X number of members, you got a seat on the central committee. He called me 6 months later. He said, guess what? They put me on the nominating committee for the party. And I said, oh, wow. And he said, yeah, before I used to just get to vote for the jerks. Now I get to pick which jerk I'm going to vote for. And because we're bright, people in politics will recognize our brightness when we walk in the room. Jesse Jackson used to say, when I'd say to him, what do I do? He'd say, you're the PhD asking the no D what to do. You walk in the room, you'll figure out. I went to New Hampshire, and in like 2 hours, I was helping run the place. I mean, we're smart people. if you're smart in business, you're going to be smart in politics. If you're smart in politics, doors will open. I'm done. Thank you. I just wanted to get that in because I think it's so important to give people a sense that you actually will benefit from this.
Absolutely. That's a very good point. And speaking of smart people, Vivian, you're back on. So, you know, we don't want to take too much of everybody's time. We did want to kind of do, you know, give a brief rundown, but I want to send it over to Miss Vivian Khelef and close this out, please, and give us a final statement before we are done.
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you for everybody that Zoomed in this evening. Really, I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart, because this is such an important campaign, organization, and mission, and we really need everybody to hop aboard. On the note, and I can't follow Dr. Zogby, but I'm going to try here. Very difficult. Business was mentioned several times. In order to have a successful business, you need money. We need to run this organization like a business. It's not a business, of course, but it needs to be run by one, like a major corporation, and we all need to be shareholders. People who are invested in this organization, just like you're invested in a corporation as a shareholder. And there's money in our community, and it takes money to register people to vote, to organize, to become a force that will be reckoned with. And we have money in our community. We're successful business people, professionals, and we're generous. And I can tell you one thing, we needed the software that Sufyan was talking about in order to start. These preliminary board members were ready to dig into their pockets and pay the first payment. And I'll tell you, it's $10,000 for just 6 months of usage. So it's not cheap. We wanted to start. We were committed enough to finance it ourselves. But when we mentioned it to one of our supporters, the first question asked is, what do you need the money for and what will it do for you? Once we responded, he forked over the entire bill for that first payment, gladly, and we thank him for that. So when people know what it is you're doing and they see results, they will be willing to support you. And that's what we intend to do. We intend to be transparent. We intend to show results. We will be held accountable. And that's why I'm saying it's a work in progress. We are open to hearing ideas, suggestions. We're willing to tweak everything here and there. But I know that there is no way somebody can, in good faith, tell me or anybody else that we shouldn't be doing what we're doing and we're not going to succeed, because we are. But it takes support. And I would implore you to think about that after you Zoom off tonight, and think how it is you can support us to not only launch, but to soar. And that is going to require funding. Again, I'll say it once and I'll say it again. We want each and every one of you to be a shareholder and somebody who is invested and vested in the success of what we are trying to do. And that is to organize a voting bloc of Arab Americans and people from North Africa, MENA, that's the key term now. We're always saying MENA, the Middle East and North Africa, so that whenever anybody wants to run a campaign in our community, they can tap into our resources and we will be there to support them. That's the bottom line. So thank you again. I wish you all a good evening. Thanks again to Dr. Zogby, to Mo, to the rest of the board members. And we hope that this is just a beginning and not the end. And we'll be Zooming back with you, hopefully in the next 30 days or so, for an update as to what we've been doing. This is just a beginning and not the end. And we'll be